All right, we're on Civics and Economics Founding Principles, Unit 1, Study Guide, Part 2. So question 7, where were the shots heard around the world, and why is it important? So the shot heard around the world is at Lexington and Concord. So what has happened, the British have found out that Sam Adams and John Hancock are located in this area, and they have heard that they have a lot of weapons. So the British go to arrest them, and this is when Paul Revere does his famous ride, and William Dawes does it as well. And so when the British soldiers arrive at Lexington and Concord, the Minutemen, the colonists, are there and they meet them. And shots get fired. And by the end of it, the colonists have won. They won at Lexington and Concord. But what it kind of shows is that ordinary people, just like little guys, will fight against impossible odds. Like if you were a gambler, you would not have put your money on the American colonists. Is kind of one of those things like when you look at the last Super Bowl, you had the Eagles versus the Patriots. You know, most people would have put their money on the Patriots to win because they have that kind of franchise. And when you looked at Britain and you looked at the colonists, you would put your money on the British winning. So why is it significant? Why is it so important? Whenever you've had any sort of rebellion going on in the world, like a couple of years ago, there were a whole lot of rebellions, revolutions going on in the Middle East. Most people point to the colonists, to the American colonists at this moment. It's like, here are people who say, no more, I'm not going to take it anymore. And they go ahead and they rebel and they win. It gives hope. That's what causes rebellions and revolutions. It's hope. So when other people rebel, like the French do, not that long after the American Revolution, they pointed to ours because it was hope. It was hope for people to win and to be successful. Question 8 is, what is a direct democracy? And you had to give 2 examples in colonial America. So in a direct democracy, every citizen votes on each law every time. So one man, one vote. Direct democracies in colonial America would be like New England town hall meetings, and that's the ones that those Puritans created. And then the Mayflower Compact, which is the one that the Pilgrims created. We still have direct democracy. How you do SGA elections, your student government, that's direct democracy. You guys vote, and whoever gets the most votes wins. Same thing with homecoming and prom. That's how it works. It's a direct democracy. We just don't do them all the time anymore because of how big the country is. When you're looking at back then, you're looking at towns of maybe 300 people, and out of the 300 people, maybe 100 people could actually vote. So it was very feasible, it was very possible in colonial America. So not so much today, but we do still have forms of direct democracy going on. Like there are times when we as people, as voters, go vote on a law. Most of the time today we have an indirect democracy. So number 9, what is an indirect democracy? And you had to give one example in colonial America. Now, indirect democracy is where we, the people, the citizens, we elect representatives. And those representatives will be our spokespersons, and they will vote on the laws for us. And this is really what the United States has. We have an indirect democracy. We elect House of Representative members, we elect senators, and what they do is they vote on all the laws for us. And every once in a while they'll put something before us, but if they put it before us to vote on it, it's a direct democracy. A colonial example would be in Virginia with the House of Burgesses. Number 10, who wrote the Declaration of Independence and what was the purpose of it? So Jefferson is given credit for the writing of it, and yes, there are other people who write it, but it's Jefferson who gets the main credit. And he, in the Declaration, outlines all the reasons for the breakup. You know, he gives grievances, he gives lots of grievances. We read some of those. But what he's telling you, what he's telling England is, here are all the things you've done wrong. Here's how we replied. We tried to do letters. We tried to get reason passed with you guys, but you wouldn't listen. So because you won't listen to us, we're no longer together. We're breaking up. The Declaration of Independence is just a big breakup letter. That's all it is. Number 11 is who could vote in the beginning of the nation's history? Pretty much only white guys who own land. And you had to be a citizen. And back then, you were you're looking at a very, very small portion of the nation's population that could actually vote. So as time goes on and we looked at it in the unit book, more people will be eligible to vote. But in the beginning of the nation's history, it's mainly just white male land-owning citizens. Number 12 is what proved the Articles of Confederation were weak and what replaced the Articles. Shays' Rebellion proves that the new government under the Articles is not very effective. You have a bad rebellion going on, and it's about state taxes. So Daniel Shay is causing, a revolution in the New England areas. He's crying out no taxations without representation. So what ends up happening is the rebellion eventually gets put down. But the government, the central government, the national government can't really do anything about it. So as this revolution, this rebellion is going on in pretty much the northern part of the country, they ask for help from the federal central government. They can't do anything about it. And what the founding fathers realize is that this government is too weak. They can't really respond to the state's needs. So they need to change it. And so the United States Constitution finally replaced the Articles. So we looked at, the Articles of Confederation. We looked at Artie. Here's your Connie. And look at all the things that Connie is going to have. The Constitution has a judicial branch. It has an executive branch. It has a two-house or a bicameral legislative branch. There's a way to fix it. It's timely, but it's not like the Articles where you had to have 100% approval. The Constitution works because it's what we call a living document. It can change and adapt with time. Number 13 is why did the Founding Fathers make the Articles of Confederation weak? They're really, really scared that they're going to create a monster in their backyard. England is 4,000 miles away, okay? It's 4,000 miles away from the colonies. 4,000 miles where if England gets upset, you're going to see the boats coming, you're going to see the soldiers coming, and it's going to take them a while. But if you create a monster in your backyard, here in the 13 colonies or the 13 states, it's going to be a very quick response to anything that happens, anytime you misbehave. So because they're so scared of a powerful central government, they create one that is impossible to continue. And so remember, when we looked at the Articles, we looked at it being a monster that has to be put down. And that's kind of what you have with Shays' Rebellion. When Daniel Shay led his rebellion, he proves that the Articles cannot withstand time. It's not going to be a viable government. And so they have to get rid of it. And they do it with the Constitution. And the Constitution is a very strong government. And it is very similar to the British government, but it works. Number 14 is what was the Three-Fifths Compromise? What did the South get and what did the North get? So the Three-Fifths Compromise deals with slavery and representation. The South, okay, if you look at, here's the slave population of the 13 colonies in 1770, okay? If you look at where most of the slaves are, it's going to be in the South. If you look at Virginia, you're looking at like 188,000 slaves. So what they want to do is they want to count their slaves, their enslaved population, in their population. So they want to count the enslaved people, and they want to count all of their white population that owns those plantations as well. And if they do that, instead of having 188,000 people, they might have, I don't know, let's say 300,000 people. That 300,000 people means that they would have more people than New Jersey up here. And because they would have more people, they would get more representatives in the new government, in the new legislative branch. So New Jersey's not stupid. New Jersey figured it out. They start arguing. And what ends up happening is this three-fifths compromise gets made. Everybody is realizing what Virginia's trying to do. So what the North agreed to do is that for every 5 slaves, only 3 are going to count for taxes and representation purposes in the new legislative branch. So when you look at the House of Representatives under the Constitution, in the beginning, these southern states have more representation. But in exchange for that, the North wants tax money off slaves. Slaves are considered property back then, so you tax property, so they want tax money. So the South got that representation that they wanted, because out of their 5 slaves, they're in 5 enslaved people, 3 are going to count for their representatives. But the North also gets the tax money. So every 5 slaves, 3 are going to count for property taxes. So it's a compromise because it's a give and take. The South got a little bit of what they wanted, the North got a little bit of what they wanted, and they both walked away happy. Okay? And so this is what you're looking at with the three-fifths compromise. All right, so for number 15, which constitutional convention plan? So this is asking you about New Jersey, Virginia, and then the Connecticut plan. Connecticut is also known as the Great Compromise Plan. So all you have to do is put an X or a check mark, whatever you want to do, okay? So known as the Big State Plan is Virginia. Virginia had the biggest population, particularly when they counted their slaves. The small state plan is going to be New Jersey. It's a very small state still, but today it's really heavily populated, but not back then. There wasn't that many people there. Who called for a bicameral or a 2-house legislative branch is going to be Virginia and the Connecticut plan. In the Connecticut and the Virginia plan, they both want 2 houses, like a House and a Senate in the new lawmaking legislative branch. For D, called for a unicameral, a 1-house legislative branch was New Jersey. So New Jersey is a small state. They wanted everything to be equal. E called for 3 branches, legislative, executive, and judicial. They all agreed that that's the best plan, so every single one of them should have an X under it. New Jersey, Virginia, and Connecticut. Everybody agreed after the fiasco that the articles were that we needed to have an executive and a judicial for the federal government. So they all agreed on that. It's how you make the legislative branch that's the most controversial part of the actual constitutional convention. Wanted to include slaves in their state's representation. That's going to be Virginia. New Jersey has slaves. Everybody has slaves at this point in history, but it's not like it's a huge part of the northern states' population. But it is a big part of the southern states' population if you counted the enslaved people as population. G wanted 1 representative from each state in the legislative so everyone would be equal. That's New Jersey, and that's really what the articles had done. The articles made everybody equal, and they kind of want to do the same thing. H wanted to have more representatives in the legislative, which is why they wanted to include slaves as part of their population. That's Virginia. They're trying to make the odds in their favor. When the new government is created, they want a Southern-dominated government. And then I created a bicameral legislative branch with 1 house based on population and the second one based on equality. That is the Great Compromise. That is the Connecticut plan.